Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Girl Dad Show. Today, I have my good friend Chad here joining with me, and I'm super excited to introduce him to you. Chad, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Young. Appreciate it, man. Love it.
I'm really excited to catch up, but before we start catching up on life and business and all the things that you're working on, why don't you tell the listeners what you do for a living?
Yeah, so I'm a small business owner, and much like Young, I've decided to be out there in the trade world. So I own a company that does commercial and residential glass and mirrors. So everything from showers to wine rooms to mirrors to conference rooms to balconies to anything you can imagine in the built environment here in Austin. So loving it. Just started a couple months ago.
Yeah,
Still right in the middle of it.
I can't wait to dive into it because I haven't heard all the latest about this new business venture, and I'm super excited to catch up on it and double click into it. But can you share a little bit about your journey to this point? Because it is a very interesting decision that you made, both as a dad and as an executive and as an entrepreneur. So I'd love to share with the listeners your professional journey a little bit.
Yeah, so I think one of your questions when we started this was like, is there a one event or is there one time in your life? And so I actually have a degree in architecture. I was super passionate about the built environment early on. I studied architecture, I graduated a degree in architecture, but I found out I actually was not a good architect. And I found that through studios and through interviews and through internships. And so when I graduated, I was panicked. Like, what do you do with a degree that you don't want to use? And so I made sort of what seemed like a rash or unrash decision, and I found a work visa and decided to move to London. And so I literally, like, no place to stay, didn't know anybody, had a couple buddies I talked into it, and I moved to London. And from that day for a year or so, I had a work visa, what allowed me to work anywhere I wanted. I could work at a bar, I could work in a real company. And my roommates went and got bartending jobs, which is what you do when you're 21, 22 years old. And I wanted to get a real job. I don't know why. I still don't know why. It's just like, it doesn't even make any sense to me. But so I interviewed at real companies, tried to find a real job, and I got.
And now you own a small business. I love the history. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
And I just got like, it's just one of those moments in life where you just look back and you're like, I don't even know 20 years ago how this happened, but I was struggling to find a company to work for or a place to interview. So I went back to the company who gave me the visa, and they had a job board, big job board in the corner. Places people had worked with this visa, and one of them said Wine Smart, and all I saw was the word wine, and I was like, oh, I'll call this company. The things you do when you're 20 plus years old. And I called the company up, and this is 2001, right? So this is the .com boom. It's this .com company, winesmart.com, and they were selling New World wines into Europe and Asian countries. So like wines from North America, California, right, South America, New Zealand, Australia, into a market that never had them before. They're used to European wine, German, France, Italian wine. And I just hit it off with the CEO of the company. They were doing logistics, had their own wine, wine clubs. They were doing wholesale retail, working with retailers. They were doing wholesale. And for me, I got into operations for the first time. I know we bonded over operations, but like, I'm in a warehouse counting bottles. I'm trying to figure out how many bottles come in and out per truckload. I'm trying to figure out all of these things that I'd never really done before. I come from a professional family. My father's a doctor. I wasn't really exposed to small business, relatively speaking. And I just fell in love. I absolutely fell in love with Excel and operations and just started figuring things out. And that started a 20-year journey. That CEO became a mentor of mine. He's still a mentor to me today. I ended up working for him in multiple different companies over a 20-year period. We started a company that did consumer products and sold to big retailers. So Office Depot, Home Depot, you name it. I ended up working for one of the big retailers for Home Depot. I did a startup inside of Home Depot. We can talk about that. Like what it's like to build a business inside of a huge business. I was an early employee, maybe employee 100 at Instacart, the grocery delivery company.
Wow, early, yeah.
So I got to go on that wild ride. I certainly went back to grad school. I got an MBA from Duke at some point. And got back into the built environment. And then a moment came up, and it's sort of when you and I met, which was like, hey, I think I'm ready to make a bet on myself. Right?
Yeah.
I love what I do. I love the built environment. I want to be an owner, a small business owner, and I want to be out there doing the work as opposed to a passive player and doing it. So I ended up finding a company, buying it, and here we are.
So awesome. I love it. It's like the whole thing is so fun and so ridiculous. I just love it. Like
Yeah, ridiculous.
yeah. And then, just out of curiosity, what does your wife think about your recent exploits and transitions? And I'm sure it's got to be an interesting conversation piece at the dinner table to say, "Hey, I'm going to go start a small business."
Our wives have bonded over this because I think our wives are married to the same type of person, right? This serial
Hey,
entrepreneur.
can I be better looking though? Is that okay? Can we be the same?
My wife for 20 plus years, we've been married almost 20 years now, has supported this endeavor, right? So when I started that first, non-architecture job, it was, the same mentality that I take today, which is I don't know what I'm doing. I'm up for the adventure. I'm all in, 100% all in. Like you'll see me wearing the clothes and the hat on the weekends. Like I just go all in. And I think while that has its twists and turns, as you now know, right, and there's ups and downs to that, there has been moments where I took a desk job where part of my job felt like a normal job, and I was miserable during those small periods of time, and my wife could recognize it from the moment I made that decision. So I think she would rather be with this version of me, even
Yeah.
if that means there are peaks and valleys in what we're doing.
Yeah.
So when this idea came up, she was like, "I'm 100% all in. Like, let's do
Mm.
it."
She was
Uh,
already into it. She knew.
oh,
She
now,
knows you. Yeah.
still 2 months later, 3 months later, no, she is. But
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And then, what do your kids think about it?
That's actually been the most rewarding part of this, frankly. Like I said earlier, I always go all in. I mean, like, literally, if I'm working for a company, I rep it day and night. And so I think my kids have always appreciated that. They've always seen everywhere I work. But this is the first time where they're like solid from the beginning, like where they went with me to look at spaces to lease for a shop. They went with me to look at vans to buy, like, and really solid from like, my dad doesn't know what he's doing. He's making decisions to like, oh, that's what it looks like. It's now an office. It's got a van. It's now a business.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I think it's been super rewarding for them to like actually understand how an idea gets from a place in through execution, and that it's okay to not know. It's okay to literally just like,
Yeah.
put one foot in front of the other foot and, move down. And so they come to, we put one of the splurges we made when we built our shop was we put a Papa Shot, like the two basketball goals, you can
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
and the reason we did that is that we wanted our kids to come and feel like they wanted to come. And so we have
Yeah.
this
That's
all
awesome.
the time. So
Yeah. That's great. And so now they have something to look forward to when they visit.
yeah, it's exciting.
But has any of them shown any interest in the business itself? Have you seen any kind of
Yeah,
inklings?
yeah, for sure. I would say my oldest, who's 12, interest in the business. They're always curious if, like, they want to see pictures of what it looks like installs that we do.
Yeah.
But he's the most curious in a sense that he asks lots of questions about what it's like. Like, how do you find a glass? Who do you buy it from? Like, how does it get installed? Like, how do you figure out how much to charge for it? And so he's asking, those sort of early entrepreneur questions like, how does this work? Like, like how much money do we make if you sell X, Y, and Z? And of course, as you know, that depends. It depends on how efficient you are.
That's so funny. I love that. That's great. So you.
Well, I think in all three of them, at least at this point, I have three little boys, and so I think right now I would suggest that all of them have this notion now that someone can take something from an idea to execution. They have no idea how it happens, or if they're willing
Yeah.
to do it, but they know now that people that they know, have gone from this crazy idea around a kitchen table with as a family to a business that's running, and I think that kind of
Yeah.
confidence maybe seeps in. I don't know where it goes. You don't know where it goes from here, but I feel like your kids witness that. There's
Totally.
like osmosis that happens of being around that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of osmosis with it, and I think that a lot of the lack of fear or the sheer stupidity, I guess, or dumbness. I don't know, whichever way you look at it. But I think my ability to start building businesses with really no fear and kind of just being so like naive and dumb to the fact that it could fail and be miserable is because I grew up watching my dad build businesses. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just like,
Yeah.
it's just common. It's just normal. Like, I
Yeah.
just kind of grew up with it. I never really probed into his business. I never like asked him questions about it. But I think because I always kind of like knew that that's what he did
Yeah.
in the background, that he created value, he created it, like it just kind of became a natural stance for me. And I don't think I really realized it until recently as I've gotten older and wiser
Yeah.
that, my dad was able to provide that even without even conversation, just by existing and doing it,
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I think that's,
Yeah.
that's step one, is knowing that that's a viable option. Because I mean, I would say that, as you know, as an entrepreneur, it's not easy either.
Yeah.
But I think 20-year-old me thought you had to go work somewhere. Like that was what you're supposed to do. It's like you graduate
right.
from college and you go to work for somebody.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah. Get a real job. Yeah,
yeah.
totally.
And I think, I hope I hope for my kids, is a spectrum of idea of what you can do, and that little bit of confidence helps them be like, you know what, I have an idea and I'm willing to go for it, as opposed to just deciding I'm going to go work in consulting or investment banking, which are all great jobs, but like if that's the only path but now that there is different ways in which you can go about it, I feel like that opens up the whole universe, right?
Can I ask though, like, what made you jump over that? Was just an itch to start your own thing? Because I mean, I would qualify you as a success as an executive and as an employee, working for really notable companies, doing really cool things, working with big, large sums of money. Like, in all respects, that you've hit all the things that you need to be to get a real job, right? Quote unquote real job. And so, what made you, like, stop that and jump into building a small business and being the owner operator even,
Definitely the owner operator. I mean, I was on installs all day yesterday, so now.
Yeah, dude,
yeah.
please take some selfies and send it to me. I want to see you in your van.
I told myself at least for the first 4 months I would be on every install, so I
love that.
I'm carrying glass.
I love
I
it.
think it's the most rewarding part, right? I don't know the real answer in a sense, but I feel like there's a part of me that always wanted to the grit is the enjoyable part for me. Maybe that's weird for some people, but like I like the grind. Like I don't mind it. I like to be in it. But some of what I thought I was missing out in the last 15 years of doing some exciting startups is I never felt like I was in control of the destiny. And the irony of that is when you're a small business owner, you're not really in control of the destiny. They do happen. But I felt like that I could control where I wanted to go and what level of service I wanted to provide and drive the ship. And to me, and I think you absolutely recognize this based on some of your investments and some of the businesses you own, but there's this huge gap in the built environment where great services, great trades are hard to come by. And even those great trades, to find someone who's scaling, that's got process and got systems and can communicate well, doesn't exist in the marketplace. And so, here we are trying to build apartments, houses, buildings, and and the people who do the actual work, the services and the trades, are 30 years behind. I mean, if I look at my time at Instacart, the most rewarding part of that time was that you got to work with some of the best engineers in the world.
Yeah.
And when problems presented themselves, you had a whiteboard and you had brilliant minds like trying to attack it. From how do you systematize this? How do you create process around it? How do you create an automation process to put that order with this order and batch it? And that's, if you think about the built environment, it's the largest deployer of assets in the world. Whatever, more money goes into the built environment than anything else in the world. Oil, gas, you name it. And yet the majority of the folks that are doing the physical work of like blocking and tackling and executing are like on a phone in text. And to me it was like, man, that's a huge opportunity to do something I love, be back in the built environment, work with my hands, but also take some of that learning from the last 20 years of building up operations and putting tech where it needs to be, not making everything software driven, but putting smart tech where it needs to be. And being able to scale something that typically hasn't been scalable, right?
I mean, you're preaching to the choir, man. I love that. I love that mindset. The real curiosity I have for you is around what do you think are the major differences now that you're in the entrepreneur seat that you were expecting and didn't expect?
Man, what's different?
Anything that you're like surprised about, like jumping into the seat? Like, do you think it's easier than you thought it was going to be? Harder? Like, more
You know,
challenging, more riskier? Like,
yeah, I would say I'm paying a dumb tax, and partly because I'm one half of my install team, so
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
half the brains in the field trying to tackle the problems, and I don't know how to tackle them. And so, there's a dumb tax you pay, meaning like you think that this piece of glass in this install is going to go this way, this mirror is going to go this way, and then you get there and it doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah,
For whatever
yeah.
reason, you mismeasured. You don't realize that the piece of glass is so high you can't get it in that space. And I think, I thought naively that like, oh, all that stuff, I'll figure all that stuff out and I won't make those mistakes. But I've made a lot of those mistakes, and they haven't cost
Yeah.
me a lot of money. And I think for the dollars I've spent, they're rewarding lessons, but you're still paying them. And I thought, it's kind of like the pool business. You don't know what you don't know, and then you're like, in theory and logic, this is how I'd approach it, this is how I'd price it, and you go to execute it, and the built environment is something totally different.
Totally. Yeah.
And you have to just change. You have to alter your course and
Yeah.
and learn. And so maybe to that, I didn't realize how much of that was going to be here in the beginning.
Oh yeah, it's very humbling. It's very humbling because like as a tech executive, you go into these things like going, oh, how hard could it be? And then you like go in there, and you realize there's a lot of stuff that you just don't know, and you would never know,
Yeah.
and it's complicated. It's very complicated, and I mean obviously it's know-how and it's industry insight and knowledge, but
Sure.
having that respect for that role and that understanding is super important. And I love that you're so humble about it. That's freaking fantastic. And I also love that you're actually doing it. That's great. It's great.
Yeah, I think it makes you. I mean, listen, I don't know. We'll find out. But I think it makes you a better leader, right? Because I feel like
Completely.
now I am so much more empathetic. I could see if I didn't do installs for the first 6 months or 4 months, right? Where I would have been like, I'm pretty sure you guys could have done that. Like, I'm sure like I know we're gonna reorder that piece of glass, but I bet if you worked hard enough, you could have figured it out.
Yeah.
But now that I've been on enough job sites and I realize the mistakes that I'm the one doing the measurements or like making the quote, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that, like shoot. And so I do think you're smarter. You look out for those things now, but when those things do happen, I think I can already tell that I'm more empathetic to find a solution and not blame, and just be like, like listen, the built environment's different. Every home's different. Every business is different, and just
Well, and there's also instant credibility, right? Because you sat in their seat. It's not like you were just like, a pencil pusher or some sort of owner. You actually know what they're doing, and you feel it. So there's an instant level of credibility. That's awesome, man. I love it. It also depends on what your success criteria is, but there's also a lot to be said about the fact that like one of my success criteria is like, I'd love to get to a place where I have enough businesses, satiating my family and fiscal needs that I can literally like be a pool boy. I'd love to be like, I'd love to have 10 pool, you know what I mean? I'd love to clean 10 pools a week, and just like have that be part of my life, right?
Yeah,
because like you're going to eventually get bored. Let's say you optimize for all these businesses to scale. I'm just saying future state. I'm not saying right now. I'm like very far away from that state. I'm not like financially free by any means. I don't want anyone to listen to this and go, yeah, Young's taken care of. I'm not at all. I'm still building. But when I think about future state, I do think about those things, right? Because it's kind of like, what do you do at that time and what makes you happy? And if you have the choice of it, I would clean a pool. That'd be awesome. It'd be super fun.
Actually, I'll tell you a funny story that rings true to that is that when I built a startup inside Home Depot, I worked in store operations, and so store operations is sort of like, I don't know if anyone knows anything about Home Depot. Obviously, it's a very large company, but if you go to their headquarters in Atlanta, it doesn't even say Home Depot on it. It just has a sign out front that says Store Support Center. And so there's this mentality at this what is one of the largest companies in the world, right? That like you're not there because you work for Home Depot, right? You're there because you work for the store. Right, and the store is who you support, and the store is who you. And so in store operations, at the beginning it was every other week, but once a month typically. Like you actually have to check in and work at the store for the day. So instead of going to your corporate job, you put on an apron and you go to the store. And the lessons that I learned from that also I think drive my ability to be an entrepreneur, because I remember what it felt like to work on a project for 2 weeks in a spreadsheet, in meetings, in a comfortable office, trying to figure out what this actual real business was going to feel like for associates in the store, and then go be in the store for the day and watch how dumb some of the things that you were putting out there were to the person who's doing the work.
Yeah.
and then go back again and be like, oh my gosh, we are absolutely making this too hard. We're not making, we're
Yeah.
putting, and I think that was a very rewarding experience that kind of like you just said for, at some point I would like to be able to switch back to the field. Like I think they had this mentality of doing that often enough where you didn't get hubris, right? You were like, oh, this is actually really hard to do with a
Totally.
customer in front of you in an uncertain environment, and respect the person that has to
Yeah.
be in that seat doing that work. Yeah.
I definitely rolled out a program like that at Phil's Coffee earlier on, and I obviously can't prove it, but I'm like, I personally feel like that literally changed the trajectory, and that's why Phil's Coffee became so successful. But we raised Series A, and we
Yeah.
started to hire home office staff. We called it home office to mute the corporate,
Yeah.
right? So we even chose that word so it felt less corporate-y.
Yeah.
But even when you did that, you still had this kind of divide, and you had these kind of like, because you have money now, so you're starting to hire more um, specialized people. And then at Series B, man, we hired like executives that only have executive experience, right?
Yeah.
So because
Yeah.
we were attracting people, but so I think by Series B, we launched this program called Back to Roots, where we basically had every home office staff pick up 1 4-hour barista shift every quarter, and then once a quarter, our Google reviews went skyrocketing down, but the sheer volume of awareness and empathy like skyrocketed, right? Because now you're not this like, oh, I'm way smarter than you. I like, trust me, just do these things and it'll be better. And it's like, then you're going to do the thing. You're like, I'm tired. Like, I'm standing for 3 hours straight. You want me to stand for another 4 and do this and that? Like,
Yeah.
they're like complaining and all these other things, and you could like see the empathy skyrocket because at the end of the day, like it's all based around that full ecosystem. Everything has to work together in harmony, and if it doesn't, you're kind of SOL. The whole business doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It becomes very unattached to the actual operation of it, and then becomes very corporate. Instacart had a thing. We had to shop, and I shopped a ridiculous amount when I was in Instacart, and it's embarrassing. Like I remember getting customer reviews, like as an operations person, seeing them come through, and I know I did that order, and you're like, oh man, like they're pissed. Like I definitely.
My God.
Like, like I chose the wrong tomatoes and I picked bad, unripe bananas, and it's like, damn, I really screwed up.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do think there's this symbiotic relationship there where,
Yeah.
you can use that ability to get back down to the ground floor
Yeah.
to really engineer a company that's got that, and also give those people exposure to a network that they don't have at the end of the day, right? Like
Totally.
people call for, if they want to, hey, I really want to learn Excel, right? And it's like they've met 2 people at corporate that have now worked in their store, and they now have someone they can reach out to. And I think it's
That's right.
that conduit
Totally.
for them.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And it also creates familiarity and psychological safety, right? Because, it's like them versus us. That mentality always starts to kick in, and especially when environments where you have like blue collar staff versus white collar staff, like that mentality always starts to seep in.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you have, those connection pieces because it shows that familiarity and the ability to break down those silos and start creating feedback loops either ways, right? But that's awesome, man. Do you have a family of entrepreneurs, or has anybody else started a business in your family?
I mean, that's hard to say. My father is a doctor, retired now, and certainly he owned his own practice at some point. I think in the medical profession, it's hard to call them entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
It's a very different world. My brother is the same way. He's a practicing physician who owns his own practice. So I think there was a little exposure to that, but truly none. I mean, like I had friends and family that like I knew their parents owned their own business, but it wasn't a situation where I showed up at their warehouse to see what they do. It was like you just knew that some families that's what their parents did, and versus my father was in a more traditional field, so to speak. So I don't think like I said earlier, like in 2001 when I showed up in London at WineSmart, it was like the first exposure to like true grassroots ground floor, like this company is building itself up and its processes up, and it's trying to figure out what it is. And I know I'd never had experience with that, and that's where I fell in love with the idea of you're building something, it's not physical
Well,
product in this case, but it's it's physical process, it's a physical service, but it's like building, but just with different blocks.
yeah, I feel like your career kind of you've been working your way earlier and earlier and earlier to the earlier stages of a company. So it's kind of a natural evolution in my mind. I mean, it's you make it sound like these like great like epiphanies or innovations, but from the way that I look at your life, you were just inevitably gonna start going. You're just working your way back. You just went backwards, man. You just went from I got to get a real job to now starting a small business. You just went
Yeah,
backwards.
one
That's
reverse order, it's fine, it's fine.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. That's one of the reasons why we bonded so well because I'm
Yeah,
kind of on the same path as well, man. I'm like so just like into these like legacy simple industries, right?
yeah,
Like I think there's so much value to be provided here, and it just feels more wholesome. And for me personally, it kind of parallels really well into like parenting because I also want to show my kids that like you don't need to go into this hype cycle of
yeah,
getting educated and getting this real job. I want them to see that you can make a really good living doing what you love, and just
yeah.
being happy is the number one priority. And so I'd love to kind of turn that into a question to you, like is that something that you resonate with, and what are your goals for your kids?
It certainly resonates with me. I kind of think about it like I was very proud of my father. Like I knew he had a job that he loved.
Hmm.
And I think until the day he retired, like he was passionate. Like he worked at what was a normal, like it's not a startup, but I knew that he loved what he did and he created value, and so I always looked up to that, even though it didn't resonate with me that much, right? Like versus now, and so I feel like hopefully for my kids that I've done, like you just said, I did things in reverse order, so I've done both, and I feel like as a parent, I can be supportive of a wide spectrum of things that they want to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't. My parents were never like this, but I know, from many families that you hear this story where the son doesn't want to do what the father did, and then there's a rift in the family. That happened to my family. My father's father owned a gas station, and my father worked at that gas station. And when my father decided to go to college, he would be the first person in his family to go to college. That him and his father had a rift to which they never healed. I think I met my grandparents one time, twice maybe,
Holy cow.
and all over that sort of cultural rift of, hey, you don't value what we do, and you're going to go on your own path. And I don't, it's not a unique story. I feel like you hear that story quite a bit from a certain generational section of the population, and I feel like as a dad, I will never have that for my children. Like I know what it's like to install glass and be on the front lines and shop in stores and working put an apron on and show up on the cement floor every day. I also know what it looks like to work on Wall Street in New York City. And there's pluses and minuses to all of those avenues, but I feel like as a parent, I can respect and support and be empathetic of like whatever direction they want to go, as opposed to just trying to imprint what I think that is the right thing for them. So I mean, as a parent, I feel like that part of it, I don't know. I'd be interested to see how you feel
Yeah,
about
that's
it. 'Cause you have
beautiful.
a very similar journey, right?
Yeah, very similar, and I love that. I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and thank you for sharing your story. So technically, you did have an entrepreneur in the family. You just didn't know him that well because of the rift in it. Wow, thank you for sharing that. That is really fascinating. That it pendulum swung so hard, and it almost sounds like you're penduluming back to the middle, like you're kind of being the average of the two,
Yeah.
the lineage of your father and your grandfather. That's really interesting. And then now you're going to project to your kids something that's less about like rigidity and imprinting and more around finding what you want.
Yeah. I think you
Yeah.
said earlier, like, startups are, whether you own your business or work anywhere, like there's a grit to it, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like as a dad, I don't know how to teach this, but
Yeah.
like if I had to like go back and pick up one skill early on, like that's the one I would keep. Like the grit of it's okay to not know what you're doing. It's okay to grind out a full day's work, and that means like 12 hours a day, not 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And even if you don't know what the end goal is, even if you're not sure you like it, right? You just grind it out. And I think
Yeah.
that if you could teach your kids that, there is no situation they can't just work themselves through, because then it's a lesson learned. Like, hey, I did that, and I love that job. I worked for 2 years. I was successful, but I don't like it, right? Versus I was a total failure. that was a waste of my time, and and the lessons that you learn from it will come later and may
Yeah.
not be as obvious. Yeah.
It literally traumatized me. So I say this with a grain of salt, but I'll tell you how my dad trained grit in me. I have yet to do it to my kids because I'm like, I don't want to hurt them like that. But I will say that he had this really terrible way of training grit in me, and like it's so viscerally seared in my brain because it hurt me so bad growing up. But anytime I would fail at something and I would be upset or venting, he would have a comment that was just very matter of fact. It wasn't vindicative or vicious or anything. He would just say, "Oh, I guess you just didn't want it bad enough." And I'm like, what the F, dude? Like, what do you mean? I just told you that, like, the teacher doesn't give anybody an A. There's only one A, and, like, everyone else got Bs, and the median is wrong. Or, hey, there was, like, I was tired, and I had to go to that one vacation that we did, and I wasn't able to study. Or, like, I just had all these, I just told you all my reasons. And he's like, yeah, sure, yeah, whatever. You just didn't want it bad enough. So like what? And like everything was my responsibility and my fault that I didn't succeed,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't matter what excuse I had
Don't
or
blame
what
the
reason I had.
environment.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, like if you really wanted it bad enough, whether the teacher was bad or whether you would have figured out what the teacher liked. You would have spent extra hours after class learning about that person and figuring out what it is that would give them that A. Or
Yeah.
if you went on vacation, you had no time to study, then you would have stayed up, extra the nights after. Like he was just basically saying like it's okay. If you suck, you suck. That's
you.
your fault. Yeah, it's on you. There's like no empathy at all.
That's hardcore.
Like, yeah, it's hardcore, dude. It's super hardcore. It just used to be so infuriating. And I kind of grew up with this mentality that like if I lost something or I didn't achieve something, I just didn't want it bad enough. And then so I don't know if you want to use that or not, but that you said I don't know how
No.
to teach grit, but yeah, like that's how my dad taught me grit, and it was terrible. It was terrible.
I may not take that lesson, but there's something there. And
Yeah, please don't. Please don't. Yeah.
it opens up the floor to, like, I don't actually know how to teach it, right? I know how to do it. I don't know how to teach it, and I don't know if it's a teachable thing. And that's kind of where, as a parent, I think you've got to, you have young kids as well. I mean, at the end of the day, like, you're watching them even, mine are 10, 12, and 7, and it's like, even within whatever they're choosing, sports, school, and you start to see this now. Like, do they have the grit to go the extra mile, or do they not? Or are they in the wrong sport or in the wrong class? Like, like watching them sort of shift gears and try to figure it out. I don't know that telling them that coming up short is all on them would have been super helpful, but motivating. But I'm sure there's a way to do it, yeah, to support
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Sure of the kid's success because I think happiness can be derived without money and all those things, and I'm learning that as well as I get older.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I do think that no matter what you want, you have to be able to persevere through hardships because nothing worthwhile is gained through ease. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Well, and I
Yeah.
think I gave this example to my kids because this came up. If go back to AI for a second, right? And I use AI sparingly, but I do use it in multiple things, and so there's
Hmm.
tons of you can see as an entrepreneur, especially one that works in tech. Like you can see where this is going. There's a ton of new value being
Yeah.
created. And I was talking to my children about this the other day, and I was, just how it impacts work. And I was like, guys, one of the startups that I helped build only existed because the cell phone existed. Before the cell phone, like you could never have had Instacart. You could never had batching of individual grocery deliveries in less than an hour without the phone, GPS, texting, all of these
Right.
things.
Right.
And so don't think about it as like this limiting factor, but it will absolutely open up a whole new universe of things. It could be services, it could be the built environment, it could change the way we build homes, right? Like it could consume information and so because I think there's this conscious awareness that everyone does where it's like .com, the internet's here, the trade businesses are dead, and then the cell phone's here, and what's that going to do to business? And AI I feel like feels the same way, which is like there's so much disruption that you're like, oh, what's the average internship going to look like now? Because I spent half of my first 2 years like doing work that AI can possibly do in a much faster way.
Yeah.
That's how I learned. That's how I learned my business. That's how I learned how to do that job or that trade. And it's like, nope, there'll just be a new bar set and a new way of using that tool to get the work done that you'll have to elevate yourself to do. And I think as long as we teach our kids that kind of resilience, like new tool just means a new set of principles to which to operate a business or to sort of new tools to execute a task. That, the cell phone was that. I mean, so many businesses came years after the cell phone that are 100% cell phone based.
Yeah. No, I love the logic that you're kind of walking down here and kind of thinking about what that looks like for our kids. But I am curious about you. Like, are there things that you're currently like overcoming or struggling with? Like, what are some of the things that you're battling, even as of right now, in your new chapter in life?
Yeah, I mean, there are always battles, right? There are always, if you've ever listened to Reid Hoffman, he has a podcast that
Yeah.
Yeah. And, his intro in that podcast is there's always little fires burning.
Yeah.
In every stage of a startup. And so, I think overcoming anxiety around those is something that you have to do every time you get into a new venture, right? There's always a fire burning somewhere. And as a small business owner now, I mean, unfortunately, all of those fires belong to you in one way or, and so that's a new one, meaning like, if it's burning and it's not getting put out, then I'm sort of responsible for doing it. And whereas before there was perceived responsibility, but like it wasn't your company, and kind of there's just another level of overcoming that so that I can be productive. I don't know that I would call it like
I love it.
I think the most unique thing about having done this in reverse order, having built is like I'm actually not scared of any single task. Meaning like I've done, raising capital on Wall Street. I've built, large things to scale. I've moved, physical products around with grocery and everything else. And so, I've used the cell phone exclusively to run a business. And so, I look at some of the things we're doing at Gatsby, and it's like each of the individual components, like maybe I'm not the best at it. It's not my number one skill set, but I could do it. It's this idea that you can't do them all, and you have to pick every single day what's the most high value task to do.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I struggle with that. Meaning, like, I feel like I'm at 80%, and to get to 100% is where I need to go. And I just don't. If I went to do this day again, 2 things would I have not done, and 4 things would I have swapped in. And in a new industry, in a new business, you're still learning like that. And I feel like that is it's a lifelong struggle, right? At the end of the day, for any business, no matter if you're just starting or scaling. But I feel like that's a really hard one because you've got a finite time in the day and energy, and if you're not focusing it on those 6 tasks that make the biggest difference, then you wasted it. And is the
Totally. It's actually the Achilles heel for all small business owners, or even like smallly teamed startups, because the problem with going from big corporate to small is that the knowledge and you have all this experience that gives you no fear about tackling anything because you've solved almost everything, right? You've done really large scale things. The problem isn't the knowledge and being able to solve the problems or having the skills to solve it. It's that like there's no one else to do everything.
Yeah.
You literally have to do everything. You have this great strategic plan, you paint this picture, and then you look behind you and you're like, shit, I'm just talking to myself. All right, okay, here's the plan. Okay, which one am I going to do today? And that's the major Achilles heel, right? It's just like division of work, and how do you force rank this, and how do you prioritize it? And that's like the real fun and challenge in being a small business owner, in my opinion. And I think So I love that you said that. So given that you are now kind of in this new phase of your professional career, what do you think success looks like for you professionally versus being your own boss and owning your own business versus like being an executive at another company?
I'd actually say that the one thing that feels very different, and I don't know how this is going to play out, which is I have financial goals, right, for the company. I have would trickle down to yourself, your small business, one and the same. I have service goals, meaning like a volume of business I want to be doing, or type of business, like a type of jobs we want to be doing that sort of I got to work up to these larger jobs. So like those are always there. But I think for me, the weird shift is success to me, at least my interpretation of it, does not mean what you used to see in every book, which is like the entrepreneur, like dead on the ground, sleeping in a sleeping bag underneath his desk, working every Saturday and every Sunday, and not seeing his kids, right? I can do that. I've been there, and I'm capable of that kind of work, but that doesn't feel successful to me. And I think, honestly, it'd be interesting to see your opinion based on your background, but like, part of me still lives with that, like, to be successful, to feel successful, I need to put that in. Like, I need to have that mentality. But there's the other side of me that wants to leave yesterday at 3 o'clock so I can go to a movie with my kids in the middle of the day because it's the summer, right? Yeah. And that's a better dad and a better husband than the guy who just got home last night at 8 o'clock. And how do you balance both those things? Because the dad who doesn't go to work, or the parent who doesn't go to work and doesn't put any hours in, the business fails, is also not successful, right? But the person who does the opposite, which is you might reach financial success, but you gave up everything, and every opportunity that popped up to be at a kid's sporting game, to do summer pool at 3 p.m. on a Friday, you skipped out on. And yeah, you can do it occasionally, and no one's saying you shouldn't, have these moments, but that balance, that equilibrium, to me, is where I feel like success is, if I define it in my small business, versus maybe if you asked me 5 years ago, I'd be like, oh, I'm there on, I'm working till late at night, I'm grinding because we're scaling so fast, my hands are on the wheel and I'm there. Versus now I feel like I'm like, if that's the case, and my hands are on the wheel 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then I'm doing it wrong. Like, I'm not doing it right, and the bus is about to run out of gas, right? Or hit a tree, because this isn't the life that I want to be living. And so, to me, that's maybe the biggest difference. Maybe it comes with age, or with, switching gears a little bit.
I love it, man. I mean, you're like speaking to my core right now. I mean, I just went to a vacation with my dad in Hawaii, and he's in the next stage, right? Like, past us, right? He's older and wiser than us, and he's kind of going through that part of the journey where he's starting to think about mortality. And some of the commentary he's thinking about, he's not looking for empathy or sympathy at all. He's just he's very matter of fact. Even when I was a kid, actually, now that I think about it, but he's very matter of fact. Like, he's like, I'm dying, and I'm like, okay, all right, what does that mean? And he's like, hey, like, there's probably a good 5 or 6 years where I'll be able to like chase the grandkids around and not be a burden on you guys physically, and then they'll probably be, after that, like, I'll be a burden. So if we go on vacation, like, you'll probably have to wheel me around, or, and he's just, there's like no nonsense to it, and me, like, I mean, he like ruined a perfectly great Hawaii trip because if he did that the third day I was there, so the rest of the week I'm just sitting there freaking out about my dad, like counting how many times I'm going to visit him, how much more time I'm going to have to spend with them, and like, am I going to ever be able to golf with them again? Like, just like crazy like mortality thoughts, just rip through like an emotional vortex of just like, son to like, you know what I mean? Like dad to son. So you're speaking to my core right now, because I just went through this whole emotional vortex like the last 2 weeks of just existence, thinking like he spent so much time building wealth that he didn't spend time with me. And I love that about him. And as I get older, because it taught me how to sacrifice for extraordinary things. But on the flip side, over optimizing for naught is also bad, because then like my kid, when I was over optimizing for time the last 5 years, my kid assumed that everything was easy. Like money's easy, life is easy, everything's easy because dad and mom are always there. It's like, but that's not also what I'm trying to teach them. I'm also trying to teach them like, that like it's hard to make $1 and how hard you have to work. And so this polarity is super, super hard, and I don't know how to answer it either. But I think you're socializing the success criteria really well about like balancing between those two things. And going back and forth between those two things is super important, because I think that you can accidentally, no matter what you say, they're watching what you do. They're watching what you do.
100%.
And so being able to navigate those two lines is super important as a dad. So I appreciate the way that you said that, and I just wanted to share with you that, like, yeah, you're talking to me at the right time at the right place. I'm literally going through a whole whiteboard session around this, like crying my eyes out about my dad. I'm just like thinking about all these things. So,
Yeah, great Canadian,
yeah,
yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So can we let me switch gears because I want to be cognizant of time and I want to make sure I get my rapid fire questions asked that I like to ask every guest.
Oh, I didn't know there were rapid fire questions.
Oh yes. If you were yes, if you were able to tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself?
Enjoy being present in the moment.
Nice.
I feel like I grinded a little too much, and I liked it. I was happy, but like if you think back about those times, I don't remember being as present as I could have been because
Yeah.
when kids come around,
Yeah.
at that time becomes harder to get back. Yeah.
It really does. It really does. Thank you for sharing. And then if you can give, I mean, it could be the same answer, but if you give soon-to-be parents advice, what would you give them?
Don't take advice. That's it.
Yeah,
I don't give
that's
parenting
fine.
advice, and maybe that is it because every kid's different, every family is different. I think, you and I just talked a little bit about our own upbringings, totally different.
Yeah.
We're happy, we're doing our thing. Like I think that there's this fallacy that you're doing it wrong, which gives you anxiety as a parent.
Yeah.
And I think empathy and lessons and knowledge somewhere, but do your own thing. Don't worry so much about
Yeah,
everyone.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes, especially parents that have more than one kid seem to like really understand that because the kids turn out fine and we care less and less about them as we have more of them.
And it's like they're fine.
They're fine. Can you share something that no one knows about you that you would be willing to share on the show?
Yes. So very very few people know that I died as a kid. So I drowned as a child and was resuscitated. So I don't think about it often, and I obviously don't remember it. It was like 5. I dream about pieces of it occasionally, but I don't know if it's like manifested like
Yeah.
from hearing it as an adult or a young child. But I do occasionally think about that, like the ability of like there was a one moment decision, that could have changed, and so.
Crazy.
Sometimes at the right place in life, that comes back and it reminds me to worry a little less about all the seriousness of everything and like be a little more in the moment because you could die. And I
Wow.
have.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole nother thing that we could talk about. I mean, just like you know what I mean, like the mindset that you have. Maybe that's where you got your grit.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where you got your grit. Just appreciation for life, right? Living it to its fullest. So many things. I mean, I'm not a therapist, so you got to go talk to somebody to break down what you do. But that's incredible. Thanks for sharing that. Do you have a favorite book or a podcast that you recommend?
Oh, I don't. I don't. I listen to a lot of books and a lot of podcasts. My only advice I would say is it's okay to quit books.
Mm-hmm.
I have like a lot of half-written books, half-read books all over my house where
Yeah.
I needed inspiration in the moment. And while the whole book's probably fantastic, most of them are business books or some sort of, entrepreneurial journey books. But,
Yeah.
it's okay. Sometimes you get what you need in chapter 2 and you just leave it and maybe you come back to it 10 years later. So,
Yeah. That's awesome. Chad, just for posterity, I'm actually writing a book, so if you half read my book, I will be a little mad at you. I'm totally teasing. I'm just making jokes. I'm being silly. All right, sorry. Let me ask my last question. So, when you're not being a super dad and building the next greatest small business here in Austin, Texas, what does Chad do for fun? What do you do for your downtime?
I love to smoke barbecue. So, like if I'm not here at working and it's a Saturday, I'll be smoking a brisket or some ribs. To me, being able to sit on my deck and do that is, yes, I
So
love golf, I love these other things, but to me, it's a super fun thing, and you get to share, obviously, that with friends and family, and so it's one of my favorite pastimes.
Yes, now that I know that, I'm expecting an invite. We got to do this. I'm so excited. I
Hey,
love
we
smoked
did.
barbecue. This is perfect. Yeah, let's do it. Oh, it's going to take us like 9 months to get it
Yeah.
scheduled, but we will get it scheduled.
Based on our historic planning, it's going to take us a better part of a year to get together. But we'll try really hard.
Thank you. Yes, please, please. Let's make it happen. Chad, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I know how busy you are, and I know how busy it gets running a small business. So thank you for being on the show.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, see you.